We are going to be having a conversation that has just captivated me recently, and it is this concept of the strongest planet. And we have with us here today Ricky Williams, yes, the former NFL football player.
You add the layer of planetary strength, at least for me, there is an aha moment. The most meaningful experiences in someone's life are going to correspond to the planets in their chart that have the most strength, which means the ability to draw those experiences in.
What events have the most impact on you?
When it talks about strength, it's saying that strength comes from two places. First place it comes from is what house is the planet in? And the other place that planets get their strength from is aspects.
It's really amazing to find new frontiers within astrology. It doesn't negate everything you knew. It just adds another layer.
It's not saying this is the planet you're going to identify with the most. It's saying this is the planet that has the most ability to attract meaningful experiences into your life.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the Astrology Hub podcast. I'm so happy that you've tuned in here today. We are going to be having a conversation that has just captivated me recently, and it is this concept of the strongest planet, not the ruling planet, the strongest planet. And we have with us here today Ricky Williams, yes, the former NFL football player, Heisman Trophy Award winner, turned astrologer, and also astrology app developer, which is just so cool, Ricky. Your background is amazing. He's also now expanding his app developer capabilities and starting to work with AI to actually bring even more to life for all of us. So it's really exciting, Ricky, to have you here today. And I would love if we could just start off with this concept of the strongest planet. What do you mean by that? How did you come to discover it? And let's start there.
Yeah, I just want to note that right now, all of us know that Uranus just entered the sign of Gemini, and my sun is at 0 degrees Gemini. And it's interesting that I'm here having this conversation about what is a revolutionary idea. And one of the things I read about Uranus was it rules things that are really old or really new. And this idea that things can come back, they repeat themselves. And so I got it from an old book written in the 1930s, 1940s, this idea of planetary strength. A little bit more background. When I first found astrology, it was Vedic astrology. And Parshar's Light was the name of the software. I remember the first time I put my information in, and on the main screen, there was a graph. And the graph said Shad Bala, which means 6 strengths. And it was a bar graph showing the strength of the planets. And in studying Vedic astrology, spent some time in India. They have temples for each of the planets. And so in Vedic astrology, they talk much more about planets. They don't really talk that much about signs. They'll talk about nakshatras, but they don't really talk about signs. It's really about the planets. Then I switched over. I found a really cool Vedic astrologer who used the Western zodiac, and I started playing with it, and I was like, this is it. But as I shifted over into Western astrology, what was lost was the emphasis on the planets. It kind of shifted into the signs. And it was fine, but I always felt like something was missing. And I find this book and open one of the chapters, and it's talking about planetary strength. And anyone who's played with astrology a little bit, we innately can feel that some things are stronger in a chart than others. We even use the language, I have a strong this or I have a strong that. But it's kind of haphazard unless you're a really experienced astrologer and you can really appreciate what strength is. And so this system, it actually gives numbers to strength. And so, this idea kept blowing my mind. And then I started to read the way they talked about the strongest planet. And this idea that there is a planet in the chart that has more strength than other planets. And I kept going back and forth over this idea of what is astrological strength? It's like, really think, what is it? And one way to think about it, it's how influential an event or meeting someone, how influential something is, how much of an impact does it have on our lives? And I think of terms of events, but we often think of astrology as defining personality characteristics. And there's a famous saying, character is destiny. Character is destiny. And this idea that there's something in us that is so strong that it will attract certain kinds of events. I think most people that have studied metaphysics are familiar with that idea, but when you put it, you add the layer of planetary strength, at least for me, there is an aha moment. As you can see, right, the most meaningful experiences in someone's life are going to correspond to the planets in their chart that have the most strength, which means the ability to draw those experiences in. All right, now getting not too much into the details, but getting into the math a little bit, is the system is very clear. When it talks about strength, it's saying that strength comes from two places. First place it comes from is what house is the planet in. And to me, this is conventional astrology. We say planets in angular houses, the first, fourth, seventh, and 10th, are stronger than other houses. Okay, so that basic idea, we add numbers to it. And each planet in a house gets a certain score for being in that house based on how strong the house is. And the other place that planets get their strength from is aspects. So the more aspects, the tighter aspects, and obviously a conjunction and opposition is going to give more power than a semisextile. But we break all this down to appreciate the strength that aspects contribute to a planet and the strength that house placement contributes to a planet. And we add the scores up, and one of the planets will have more points than the other, and that's the planet we call the strongest.
Ricky, this has just been completely revelatory for me. So I have my Sun, my Mercury, my Venus, all in Capricorn, and my rising is Aquarius. So whenever I have calculated ruling planet, it's always Saturn. So I have always thought of myself as a very Saturnian person. And of course, with all that Capricorn, I do have so many of those qualities. But since you ran my chart through the strongest planet methodology and told me what my strongest planet is, which is Neptune, followed very closely by the moon, I've had a few weeks to really absorb this. What? And it's like, wow, what you just said, what events have the most impact on you? And the planetary strength being the thing that sets those events in motion and magnetizes those events to us in our lives. Moving to Hawaii, where I am surrounded by the sea, has been probably, aside from having children, one of the single most influential events of my life. And it's amazing to me to now be in this place where I have the ocean around me all day, every day, and to be thinking, wow, well, I guess actually since moving to Hawaii for the last 13 years, I am much more of a Neptunian being than I am a Saturnian one. And also very moon. I mean, everybody in the inner circle knows our entire inner circle membership is based on the lunar cycle because of these moon cycles I was going to in the beginning of my experience here in Hawaii. And it was so impactful that I wanted to bring it to an online virtual setting. So it's fascinating to me. I mean, and I'm sure for some people, their ruling planet and what they've always understood as their ruling planet is also their strongest planet. But how often do you see that they're different?
Well, this is what I love most about it, because most people, when we learn astrology, people don't explain to us the concept of strength, astrological strength, and they definitely don't talk about planetary strength. And really, most astrology books don't spend a lot of time actually talking about the planets. It really is sign-based. But if we think about it, the only reason we're ever talking about a sign is because there's an angle, the ascendant, midheaven, or there's a planet there. And so for me, the focus that's really lit me up is the concentration on the planets, is they are forces. And those forces attract events. It's funny that they can attract events, but they also manifest as feelings and thoughts. Yeah. And sometimes, right, a feeling turns into a thought, turns into a behavior, turns into an event. Right? Yeah. Right? And sometimes we have a tendency to repress certain things, and it's almost like a magnet. It attracts the event.
Yeah. Yes.
And I've had this debate with my teacher, Stephen Forrest, about the strongest planet. Because in the system, when they're defining the strongest planet, it's not saying this is the planet you're going to identify with the most. It's saying this is the planet that has the most ability to attract meaningful experiences into your life. And I think the advice is maybe you should identify with that planet so your life feels more like conscious. So your life feels more conscious. And this layer of planetary strength, it makes the big three, it makes them come alive. It adds so much nuance to it. Right? You can say all those Capricorn planets, but a Neptune person, that the nuance, and it helps people's lives make more sense, because the missing dimension in astrology are the importance, the primacy, I'd even say, of the planets. And so when someone says their chart ruler, the ruler of the ascendant, I think the ascendant is personal. So the way I explain it to Stephen, there is power, we can call it power in the ruler of the ascendant, but it's more the power of proximity, meaning that it's easier for us to identify with it. So it feels more powerful. But to me, and one of the ways I define planets is urges, forces of the unconscious. And if we have something really powerful that we're not conscious of, you'll see people when they're shocked by their strongest planet, right? And I start to explain, it doesn't describe you, it describes your life. You just see the light bulbs go off. And my teacher, Stephen, he says often that astrology is psychoactive. When you start talking about planets and planetary strengths, the psychoactivity goes through the roof. Because we all know wherever you put your attention, the energy goes. And if there's something unconscious that's really powerful that you just haven't been paying attention to, and now you start to pay more attention to it and take it more seriously, it starts to rev up.
It's so fascinating. Wow. So essentially, you're saying that the ruling planet is something that feels familiar and personal because it's close to us.
Yes.
The strongest planet is almost, the way that I was imagining it when you were speaking, is it's kind of like a force in our life that is active and helping to create the circumstances of our life, but we might not feel as personally identified with it necessarily. But if we do take that on and actually start to get to know that planet more intimately, more personally, and then it's even more, its strength grows with that awareness and that acknowledgement.
And we'll get into this more in the class, but one of the things about the strongest planet, it's our greatest potential to manifest superhero-like powers, because it's where we have the most force, the most energy. And so it's an aptitude, right? But for an aptitude to become a skill, right, we have to have some kind of training. And I think especially for raising kids, understanding the kids' strongest planets and creating opportunities for those planets to be able to express themselves. Because you mentioned earlier about some people don't personally identify with the strongest planet. A lot of that has to do with culture. Certain genders, certain cultures are more allowed to express certain things, and some aren't. And even you said, like you said, if someone's chart ruler, the ruler of the ascendant, is the strongest planet, right? They're gonna be an exemplar of that archetype, because it's powerful and it has direct access to the personality.
Yeah.
And when we start looking at, because the strongest planet to me is mind blowing. I think it is. I often think of humanity as an organism, and each of us are cells in that organism.
Yes.
And if we think about our physical organism, and there's hundreds of billions of cells, but there are different types of cells that have a specific function to do. And even their structure has prepared them to carry out that function. Our blood cells can carry iron and oxygen. It's wonderful, right? But if our blood cells started to say, hey, I want to be like an epithelial cell, and started trying to do that, we would drop dead in a minute. And so I think of the strongest planet is the most powerful indication of what kind of cell we are. Right? And I think of Neptune, moon, right? And I think of moon nurturing, sensitivity, Neptune, the imagination, spirituality, someone who creates a nurturing environment, right, for spirituality to thrive.
Jeez.
And I always think of structure, function, my body work day, structure, function. And if we think of the strength of the planets in our chart are indicating a sort of structure. We have a lot of this, so maybe we should be using it some way. We don't have a lot of this, maybe we shouldn't worry about it so much. Because in the strongest planet conversation also comes up the weakest planet conversation.
Ooh. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. I'll tell a story that demonstrates this. So we had Lila, the app, we had a company retreat at Steve. Steve lives in the desert in Borrego Springs. So we all went to the desert. We had a company retreat. And our tech guy, Sam, right, his weakest planet is Venus. All right. And one of the things we're discussing at the company retreat is the idea of the strongest planet and how we're going to get it into the app. And someone brings up the question, what about the weakest planet? And Steve, Steve steps up and he says, basically, he says the weakest planet, right? Don't worry about it. Because if there's something that's weak, right? And what it means is in order to get it to be strong, it's going to require a whole lot of effort. Right. And we only have so much energy. But if we put our effort into tending to our stronger planets, okay, right, everything will work out. So Sam's weakest planet is Venus. And over the course of the couple of days, right, there's a couple of women, we all stayed in the same house. And it wasn't anything bad, but they were kind of like, this guy kind of creeps us out a little bit. And Venus he was trying too hard to get people to like him. And the Venus is weak. So Venus's job is to get people to like us. And Venus is strong. We can't help but act in a certain way. We call it negative people pleasing, but maybe if it goes too far, but there is something about someone who just, when you're around them, you just feel better, right? They're just pleasant to be around. Someone has strong Venus, they can't help but manifest that, attract those kinds of experience. Someone doesn't, right? Again, don't worry about it. Focus on being really good at being the tech guy, and everyone's going to like you anyway.
I love that example, Ricky. That is so powerful. And I know I can hear all of you right now just going, I want to know what my strongest planet is. And also my weakest. I mean, this is a whole nother element that we haven't talked about, Ricky. So this is really fascinating. So I know that they can actually get their strongest planet calculation in the Lila app that you and Stephen Forrest have developed, which we're gonna drop links and all those kinds of things for any of you that don't have that app yet. But then also you're developing the AI tool that will give us our strongest and weakest planet. So it'll basically give us all the information about the planetary strength of all the planets. So like a hierarchy in a way.
Yes.
And then also the strength of the houses in our chart, the strength of the aspects in our chart.
Yes.
And when Ricky ran my chart through the other platform that he's developing, not the Lila app, the AI platform, he was able to see that the parallel is the strongest aspect of my chart. And I'm like, what? I barely know anything about the parallel. And that's fascinating. But Ricky, one thing I wanted to just bring up here is this idea of learning astrology and it feeling like peeling layers of an onion, and that there are times where we get new revelations about ourselves. So maybe, I mean, I've had many people where like they thought they had a different birth time, or they always ran their chart in sidereal, and then they ran it in tropical, and they didn't know what to do with that, or vice versa, or they tried a different house system and they didn't know what to do with that. So there's all these times where new information about ourselves comes in. And I always think, well, it doesn't negate everything you knew. It just adds another layer. It's like more nuance, more texture to your understanding of yourself. I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, at least my experience, it's a painful process, but it's a necessary rite of passage. It's like Indiana Jones. There's something about this sacred science that you have to earn it.
Ooh.
You have to earn it. And I think it should be that way because you have to use it, right? I started studying astrology about 20 years ago, but it took me 10 years before I felt like I grasped, and Mercury and Taurus, right? I have to be in my bones before I feel comfortable. But it took me a long time to truly really grasp it. You know? So, and part of it was, again, I started as a Vedic astrologer and trying to make it make sense, and I could make it make sense. And then I started playing with the tropical zodiac, and it like sung to me. And part of the, like, what you have to earn is you have to learn to trust yourself. You know, the books can teach us the symbols, but beyond that, it's other people's opinions that some of them are going to be useful, right? Some of them not so useful. But in the process, it's learning to trust yourself and allow that to be a process. Even something simple, like my latest one here is my teacher teaches if a planet is 1.5 degrees before the next cusp, to pull it into that next house. You know? And so I have Neptune right at the end of the third, really close to the fourth house cusp. And so back and forth, back for years, back and forth. And then finally one day I was reading something and I thought about something in my life and it just clicked, you know? And it's like, but I had to earn it. And earning it is sticking with it and having a faith and a belief that there is a way to see clearly here. And if you keep going at it, it starts to clarify. And then I think especially what I've been finding with introducing the strongest planet is, and even with, I can understand my teacher, Steve, he's been doing astrology for a long time, and this new concept, you know, he was kind of, I don't know, but we kept talking about it. He started using it and looking at charts through the lens, and it started to make a little bit more sense to him. But it's like putting on a pair of glasses. You know, you put on a pair of glasses, some things you see more clearly, some things get a little bit fuzzy, but you get a different perspective. And I found I have so many stories of this planetary strength, astrological strength, and strongest planet of showing me things that I knew were there, but nothing in the astrology could really help me feel satisfied with it. Here's a good example. All right. So my first wife was Capricorn, 3 planets in Capricorn. Okay. Second wife, Capricorn rising, moon in Capricorn. All right. And there's something about the women in my life that I've taken seriously. They all have strong Capricorn stuff in their chart. Okay. And I was thinking, what is the connection? And I'm looking and I'm like, yeah, Saturn is trying my Venus, but it was more than that. It didn't quite connect. And then you mentioned the parallel, right? The strongest planet in my chart is the moon in the 10th house, parallel Saturn. Okay, parallel Saturn. In the way I do astrology, the 10th house is the mother. Okay? My mom's strongest planet is Saturn. Okay? So like those connections, things click, click, click. I flash back to being a kid sitting on the floor, spending hours cutting coupons. Okay? The hours we spent in secondhand stores. It's and especially, I'm telling you, especially people, because typically in astrology, right, the big three, and then we kind of forget about the rest. Right. And so people and especially the outer planets, right, if they're at the very bottom of the list, even when you're doing a reading, by the time you get to the outer planets, you're so tired and you spend like 30 seconds talking about them. And so I find the people that have Pluto, Neptune, Uranus, Saturn as the strongest planets, those are the ones that are like, whoa. Right, they feel seen in a way that, especially if they don't have Capricorn, Aquarius planets, they feel seen in ways that are amazing. Again, my mom's chart is so super fiery, but then when you add Saturn is her strongest planet, it's like things click, 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 click. They start to make more sense.
When you were talking earlier about societal or like cultural things we take on that make it potentially hard for us to embody some of these aspects of ourselves. And then you were talking about Neptune and the imagination, the creativity, and the moon and the intuition and the nurturing. I mean, 100%. When I was younger, I was always in the imaginal realm. I mean, like for forever, until I started to learn that wasn't valued. Like that wasn't valuable. That's not how you That's not how you make a living. Like, I remember I loved creative writing. I got the creative writing award in 8th grade, and I just loved it. But then I went to high school, and you had to do these research papers, and you had to use the scientific method, and you had to it had to follow a certain formula. And I just started doing that. So only recently have I started writing again, which is why I'm going to have my book, which is going to be out this fall. But it was all giving myself permission to actually lean into this aspect that now that I know that it's my strongest planet, I'm like, oh my God, I'm all in. Like, this is amazing, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, if more people like just connected to the idea of planetary strength and the strongest planet and experimented with leaning into it,
Yeah.
it's because it really is a force. And when you add consciousness to that force, I put a warning sign because it's real. These things, they really do attract, they do attract events.
Wow.
And another piece that I've noticed from this is it's the first time that we really can start to tease apart the difference between a planet and a sign.
Yes. Let's talk about that more, because I've had to try to wrap my mind around what you're saying here. You're saying that we've sort of commingled these things and that they deserve to be treated as two very separate entities or separate energies in our chart. So can you tell us more?
Yeah, there's nuance here in the way I think about it. And it's implied if we think about, we say that Mars rules Aries, okay, that we see that there's some kind of connection between the two. The way that I think about it is that Aries gets its energy from Mars. Because the planets, the way I'm talking about, the planets are the forces. And it's implied, if you really think about, the planets are named after gods. No, in the first note of astrology in Mesopotamia, the planets were named after gods. And then they were named after Greek gods, and then they were named after Roman gods. And still to this day, when we think of whatever religion, we think of where's God, we all look up, right? So there's something ancient and universal and primal about the planets. And so I imagine it's springtime, and someone is just sitting back watching. And springtime, all the soldiers are getting ready to go to war, right? And their sheep that were friends last week are now button heads, okay? All right, and they're looking around and they're seeing all the new growth in nature, and they say, "Wow, I can really feel the god Mars present in this time of year." Right? Or if we think about the two most beautiful times of year in the Northern Hemisphere, the middle of spring, Taurus season, and the first month of fall, right? Right? Both seasons ruled by Venus. So this idea of that the signs get their energy from the planets. Right?
Yeah.
But there are also qualities. Like you can think of a planet as a force or an urge, right? It's active, right? And it's raw and it's active. The sign conditions it. It gives it a motivation. It gives it something, an aim, a flavoring of a way of it going about doing its job or expressing itself. So we can get the planetary energy from the signs, but we can also appreciate that they're distinctive, right? One is more active. I think of signs, when we get stuck in sign astrology, I call it the sitcom, because I think the signs are so cultural, right? It's how culture is dealing with these archetypes. Where the planets are more primal, they're trying to express through culture. Right? And when we focus on the signs, we get stuck in culture. When we go to the planets, right, we're identifying with the force, and we can utilize, right, we can utilize the energy of the signs. We can appreciate it. That's why I call the app Lila. We can appreciate the play, the different channels of manifestations that the different planets have.
Well, how does this that makes perfect sense, Ricky, and I'm glad you're such a strong advocate for the planets and us understanding them uniquely and not only attached to the signs.
Yes.
What about how does the strongest planet in a certain sign, does that matter? So like my Neptune's in Sagittarius, my moon's in Gemini. How does that color the whole picture?
Great question. So the strongest planet is it's not a gimmick, but it is it's like the key. It's the most important thing, but it really sets up a deeper understanding of things. So when we say the strongest planet, we're saying the most powerful theme. Okay? The most powerful theme, the most powerful types of events. If we're going to understand the flavor or the coloring of those events, All right. That's going to come from the sign, the house, and the aspects. All right. So an example, the moon is the strongest in the culture. Right. And I always start this. I'm talking to a woman, and the sun is her strongest planet. Okay. Sun represents the masculine force. So a female body whose strongest force is masculine, right? It's going to be something that people aren't going to expect, right? Right. And if I'm talking to a man like myself with moon as the strongest planet, and it's funny, people say, but you were a football player, right? And yes, and ever since I was in high school, right, I was made fun of, right, for being soft, right, sensitive as a football player. But I know my Mars is strong and all that. But this idea of a man whose strongest attribute is his sensitivity, right? I find women that have the sun as the strongest or Mars as the strongest, men that have moon or Venus as the strongest, right? These are the ones that can benefit most from this conversation because it does give permission that culture typically doesn't give easily or freely. And it's interesting thinking of the moon. In a woman, the way the moon tends to manifest is nurturing responsibilities. You know? And for men, the way the moon tends to manifest, it's not so much nurturing, it's more like home, like taking care of. You know, I think of Saturn, strongest planet, someone's a workaholic. Moon, strongest planet, someone's a workaholic. Saturn, strongest planet, right? He works to get away from the family, okay? Right? Moon, strongest planet, he works so much to take care of the family. You know? And you'll tell because you'll ask about the vacations, right? The Saturn one won't have any stories to tell. The moon one, he'll love the vacations. He'll love the feeling that he was able to provide the ability for his family to have a vacation. Yep.
Ricky, how do we do it? So we are going to be hosting Ricky for a 3-week course for any of you who want to go way deep into this, who want to understand the calculations, who want to be able to use his new AI app. For those of you who want to understand, okay, fine, my strongest planet is Mars. What does that mean? My strongest planet is Venus. What does that mean? How do I actually embody this more? How do I bring it more consciously into my life? We're going to be going into all those amazing things in the upcoming course. So you can go to astrologyhub.com/strongestplanet to learn more and sign up for that course. And as one of the things that Ricky's offering the Astrology Hub community is an amazing deal on the Lila app itself. So any of you who want to try the Lila app, which it's the only place where you can get Strongest Planet, is that true?
It's the only place where you can get Strongest Planet, yeah.
Okay, so if you're like, I want to know how to do this, you can get the Lila app for normally for everybody, they do a 1-week trial. Is this right, Ricky? And they're offering a 3-week trial for our community. So any of the students in the class, you're absolutely going to get access to the Lila app. You're also going to get access to Ricky's new AI app that's going to help you create that entire hierarchy. Those are going to be bonuses for students. But if you're not going to join the class, you can still get the Lila app and you can still understand your strongest planet. And because you're part of Astrology Hub in any way, you don't have to be in the inner circle to take advantage of this. You'll get 3 weeks for free. So you can try it and see if you like it, and you can play around with the strongest planet and put yourself and all your friends and your family into the app and see what everybody is. In terms of accessing the Lila app and that special deal that our community is getting, you can go to astrologyhub.com/Lila, spelled Lila. Okay, so that's astrologyhub.com/Lila just for the 3 weeks free on the app. astrologyhub.com/strongestplanet to join Ricky and in going deeper on this concept. Let's spend a little bit more time on the calculations themselves. So you said it's based on the proximity the planet has to the angles. So the 1st, 4th, 7th, and 10th house.
Yes.
And then also the aspects it makes. And are you talking about like the orb that the aspect has? Or are you talking, do the aspects themselves have a hierarchy of importance?
They do. They do.
And then does the tightness of the aspect also influence?
They do. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. One point about the house strength. So each of the houses have a max score. So an example, the 10th house, the max points a planet can get for being in the 10th house is 15 points. Right. And that's if the planet is right on the cusp. The least it can get from being in the 10th house is 13.5. And so that 13.5 would be if it's at the last degree of the 10th house. So each house has a strength, and depending how close to the cusp that planet is, it gets more of the strength from being placed in that house. Okay. That's what we call house strength. Okay. And then aspect strength. And the algorithm is really interesting. I've heard my teacher, Steve, say if a planet is in an angle, you should give it a wider orb for aspects. I hadn't really heard that anywhere else, but I heard my teacher say it a couple of times. And this system takes that into account. So depending on what house a planet is in, that planet will have a larger orb for aspects. And the significance of a larger orb for aspects means the closer it is to exact, the more points it gets. So the most points an aspect can get, a conjunction to the sun in an angle gets 15 points. Right. And in this, we do use the minor aspects. We use 10 aspects. So we use the 5 major, and we use semisextiles, semisquares, inconjuncts, sesquisquares, and parallels, right? And most people don't know about parallels because it's not really taught very much. But in this system, a parallel that's within 1 degree of declination is considered as powerful as a conjunction or an opposition. So parallels are considered very powerful in this system. And very often, parallels can be the strongest planet the strongest aspect in someone's chart.
So you're going to learn all about this. We're going to go in a deep dive on all of these elements of the strongest planet, the strongest aspects, the strongest houses. You're going to get to understand what all of this means and understand what it means in your chart and understand what it means if you are reading charts for other people. You can bring this in as another layer of the analysis that you're doing. I love this too, Ricky, because like you said before, sometimes when we're looking at a chart, there's just so much to cover that it's hard to even know where to start. But this gives like a really streamlined, like just go right into here. What's been your experience of having this as a tool in your toolkit in terms of reading other people's charts? Like, has it improved the accuracy of your reading? Has it improved the resonance of the reading? How has this impacted it?
It has for many reasons. And I think you pointed out, when you look at a chart, there's so much information, and especially people that are new to reading charts, question of where to start. And my teacher, Steve, and most people get the big 3, right? That's a good place to start. That's a great place to start. But I found the strongest planet, it serves 2 purposes. One, it's a great place to enter the chart, because this is going to be the most, right? If you talk, this is what we mean when we say power, right? The most influential experiences in this person's life. And if you go right to that in the first couple of words that you offer to the person about the chart, it's a deep resonant connection. And also, one of the sayings that my teacher uses a lot is remember what you've already said. Because a lot of times when we look at a chart, we jump here and we see something interesting and we talk about it. And then we jump here, we see something interesting and we talk about it. But we're not able to weave it together. Yeah. The thing with the strongest planet, if you really understand the theme, which means the planet, the house, the sign, and the strongest aspects to that planet, you have a foundation where you can, everything else you say about the chart, you can tie it back in or weave it back into the theme of the strongest planet. And you can talk about a lot of different things, and it's going to feel cohesive to the person, and it's going to be deeply resonant. And it is like a weaving process. Because we have all these different parts of us, and when you look at a chart, that's what you're hit with. But when you can see what is the major theme that everything else is going to really revolve around, and I think I'm sensitive to this because in my chart, typically we would say the sun. But in my chart, the sun is the weakest planet. Right. And people will look at me and they'll say, but you are a famous football player, right? And I say, I'm the 9th house Gemini sun, right? I wasn't talking, right? I wasn't preaching. I wasn't philosophizing. I wasn't doing any of those things, right? It was the opposite. I was sitting there quiet, not sharing any of these things. And when I finally broke free, the first thing I did, right? I started traveling around the world reading books. But it took a long time and a lot of push. It wasn't, right? It wasn't natural. I had to build over time. one more thing is people sometimes get sensitive about strong and weak and strong.
Yeah.
And the first thing is a birth chart describes where we started. You know? And as soon as we're born, based on the environment, whatever else is going on, we could say strength is added to the chart the more we do things. Okay. So I will say that, but also I'll say it's relative strength. It's just compared to this, right? These experiences, whether you like it or not, are going to have a greater impact on your life. And I think for me, the more I appreciated that and leaned into it, my life got easier. Again, I left football and I became a healer, right? Really leaning into my 10th house Cancer moon, and I became less of a lunatic. Right? I started to manifest more of the positive sides, and the quality of my life improved greatly, greatly.
Ricky, is this something you see often, that in the beginning of our lives, we may not be expressing as much of maybe the strongest planet is more behind the scenes and is less obvious, and that as we get older, it's like we are shedding that conditioning and we are becoming more of our more authentic self, and that the strongest planet gets stronger as we go through life?
I think that's the ideal. I think the ideal is when you were born, your parents got a sense of what your strongest planets were, and they created an environment that allowed them to express itself and develop skill in that area.
Right.
But otherwise, it's just a roll of the die, right? You might get lucky that the environment that we're born into is really supportive of the expression of our strong. It's funny, I say strongest planet, but there's strong planets. And so in my chart, Mars is one of the stronger planets. And so the part that the environment said, you're allowed to do this, right? Is they threw me a football and they said, run, okay? And my Mars, I could do that. But other parts of myself didn't get developed, right? Especially the moon and the 10th. This is my own personal experience is what has made these things jump out to me is, my progressed lunar return, 27 and a half. I was sitting I was a professional football player. I was sitting in my locker and I was looking around and I had this powerful feeling of, is this really what I'm supposed to be doing? And the feeling of it was hell no. And it was scary. It was super scary because I was like, but I put everything I am into being here, but the reality here is this doesn't feel right. Okay? Yes. And so I decided to retire and travel around the world. And then I got to this place where I was trying to become a citizen in Australia, but part of filling out the paperwork, you had to have a profession, right? A skill. And I started going down the list and I realized I don't know how to do anything. I don't have a skill. And I started saying, well, what do I want to do with my life? And what I came to on my own was a healer. So I moved to Northern California and started studying Ayurveda, which took me on a whole different path, right? The most impactful moment flip in my whole life, right, was that year. Everything I'm doing right now changed in that moment.
Wow. Okay. So now this is another tool to go back and look at our history and see how it was actually active before we were aware of it. I love this so much, Ricky. This is exciting. I think it's really amazing to find new frontiers within astrology. I think many of us are feeling that astrology itself, as we're expanding into the age of Aquarius, into like new territory, really, just as humanity, that there will be new layers of astrological understanding that continue to reveal themselves. And I feel like this is one of those. At least it certainly has been for me since you came into my sphere and we got to hang out together in Texas and do the event at the Astrological Society of Austin and Deborah Silverman's book launch event.
Yep.
So yeah.
That was great. We talked about AI too. And
we did. Yes.
Yeah. I think AI is going to change a lot for astrology. One thing I like to talk about is the original astrologers didn't have books. Is they were priests and they would go to the ziggurats, those big pyramids, and they would take notes of where the planets were, when they rose, right, what constellation they were in, and then they would take copious notes about what was going on in the kingdom. and for 1,500 years. And then those were the first astrology books. And then astrologers would look at those to try to find correlations and connections. But what we have now is we have technology where all of us have access to what those ancient scribes had, right? With Lila, any astrology app, most of them, you can pick up your phone and you can see exactly where the planets are at any moment as you're experiencing your life. So this idea of something shows up in your life and you're like, this is interesting. I wonder what's going on in the chart. Yeah. Right? To me, that's the book, right? It's you can see, oh, wow, Mars is right on top of my sun. One of the books said something about an argument. And I just got into a fight. Wow, this is interesting.
So you're seeing AI you're seeing AI as another way that we will get to experience astrology, similar to like all the different evolutions of astrology that have already happened when we started to have books, when we started to have computers, then when we started to have internet. Now that we're having AI, is just another evolution of the way that we're going to be experiencing and applying astrology in our lives.
Yeah. So one of the things that I'm working on with I call it Ask Lila, with the chatbot part of it, is the AI has your astrology and it has a basic understanding of how astrology works. And unlike talking to a therapist or a friend, right, it might sound weird, but it feels safe to talk to a computer, to AI, and share what you're really feeling on a deeper level. And it has access to the astrology and the connections that it can help you make. To me, because if you're talking to an astrologer, right, only what you share is what the astrologer has access to be able to make connections. But if you're talking to an AI who has the basic tenets of astrology, it can reflect back to you these deeper connections as people feel more comfortable sharing on a deeper level.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I can see the pros and cons on all of it. And I think there's a place for all of it. And there's a time for all of it. And there's people who will use different tools in different ways. And I think that's beautiful. It's amazing. Yeah. Ricky, well, we're really looking forward to hosting you at Astrology Hub and to offer this class, The Strongest Planet, to our community. Thank you so much for trusting us with your work, with your passion, with your enthusiasm. And for any of you interested in joining, registration is now open. We always do the best pricing that we offer on these kinds of classes when we do a live launch of a class. So if you want to get in for the live experience, access the classes live, now would be the time. All the details of dates and, of course, everything's recorded. So if you can't join any of the classes live, you will get the recordings. But all of that information is at astrologyhub.com/strongestplanet. So go and check it out. We would love to have you in class. Make sure you go download the Lila app. Go to astrologyhub.com/Lila so you know the instructions for getting the 3 weeks free, because otherwise it'll just be a week free. So make sure you go and get those instructions for that. And like I said, there's a lot of amazing bonuses that we're including in Ricky's class. It's going to be an incredible experience. So hopefully you'll join us. And Ricky, thank you for being here on the podcast. It's been so much fun to go even deeper in this. Now I can't wait to go find out what my weakest planet is, because I can just go, I'm not going to worry about that one so much.
Yes, great. Exactly.
Yeah. Very good. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you for being a part of our community. Thank you, as always, for making astrology a part of your life. Catch you on the next episode. Take care.